Hello, and welcome to my video that's being recorded for the TAMK Day Conference in 2024. The title being there behind me, Resonating with a Liquid Curriculum, the Case for a Fluid Education. In this video, I don't really want to repeat the things that I'm going to talk about in the presentation, nor do I really want to just do a duplication of the things that are written in my paper. But instead, for those of you who've taken the time and trouble to click this link and to watch this video, what I want to do is provide you with something of the backstory. I guess in media you might even call this the prequel. So it gives you something worthwhile. It kind of understands where my thinking has come from, but without actually just going over exactly the same things. So that's kind of the purpose here and what I'm trying to do. So I guess really the place to start is back in 2021, though, no, actually, I guess the place to start would be when I first became, I would say, an educator. I was taking my Bachelor of Education in 1986. But to save you the boredom of listening to all those decades working, I'll focus back to 2021. And after having a fairly serious operation, I was going out for daily walks as part of my daily recovery. And of course, being in Finland, I was walking past bodies of water, Finland having the wonderful, incredible number of lakes that it has. So I started walking towards the end of the summer vacation, and that continued daily and almost daily into the fall. And so I saw that water kind of change from kind of this sort of setting to these sort of settings and to these. And at this time, I was teaching a course called Curriculum Design and Implementation on the MBA in Educational Leadership, or as we affectionately call it, the MEL program. So I was going out for these walks and I was pondering issues of curriculum, something that I'd been involved with for many, many years. And while I was out walking and seeing these kind of different settings, that started rethinking about the idea of liquid in a way as a metaphor for what we do in education, and particularly with the curriculum aspect. Though, of course, I should say at this point, I dislike, in many respects, this way of kind of having curriculum, pedagogy, professional identity, technology as separate things, because, of course, in reality, they are entangled together, they are emergent, they are iterative. The pedagogy we use affects curriculum. The technologies we choose affect our pedagogy, and so on. But for the sake of this, to keep it simple, we'll focus on this curriculum part. And I started to think this was a really good metaphor. For one thing, of course, liquid can be in different states. It can be a solid, it can be a vapor, or of course it's liquid itself, depending upon conditions, depending on things like temperature and pressure. But also in liquid, we see waves, we see currents, we see eddies, ripples, rapids. And that also struck me as being a good metaphor for experiences in education. Sometimes we feel like we're swimming against the current. Sometimes there are tiny ripples, but they develop into waves and have a big impact. Sometimes we might get caught in a whirlpool or an eddy. So I like the metaphors that come from liquid. And then the idea that we can try to channel things, but we never really have control. Liquid will always find its own level. It's a complex system. It's affected by all kinds of variables, as we've mentioned, air pressure, wind, temperature, and so on. You can have a drought, you can have a flood. There are things going on below the surface, and you can stay shallow or you can dive deep. And all of these are expressions which I think fit well to what we experience working in education. And so I like the metaphor. But of course, I'm sure I'm not the first person to have thought of that. So as I say, this is back 2021. That led to me kind of doing some research, doing some reading, deciding there must be other people who thought about liquid as a metaphor in education. And of course, there had been. It's really very difficult to have original ideas. In fact, I would say impossible. So first thing that came up in a search on Andor was a paper about the liquid curriculum for use in virtual worlds. And in that, they mentioned Zygmunt Bauman and his work writing about liquid modernity. So my first rabbit hole, as it were, was to start reading Bauman, really interesting sociologist and philosopher, prolific writer, incredible number of books. But I guess the original one was Liquid Modernity, and then Liquid Times, and more recently there was Liquid Surveillance. I think there's about 20 books kind of covering this topic. And he writes about the fact that we're living in what he calls liquid modernity, which are times of uncertainty, that nothing is solid anymore, that many of the things that we in the past were kind of stable throughout our lives, throughout our working lives, have now become kind of liquid. So in a 7-minute video, I can't go into all the details of ideas, but that was kind of my starting point. From Bauman, I went to other readers. I found there were books by people like Oxenham who had written a whole book about higher education in liquid modernity, in modern times. Hartmut Rosa, who I'm a big fan of, another sociologist and philosopher. His book on social acceleration, and also his much smaller and much more readable book on the uncontrollability of the world. And of course, Gerbjester, who's such an excellent educational philosopher. And what I've been trying to do is kind of pull together these ideas, because I think they should be informing the way that we think about education in our modern times. So this gives you the backstory. It gives you some idea of where my ideas are coming from and what the influences have been. And in the presentation, I'll talk more. This is ongoing. It's a thought process that has been running now for 3 or more years. That I continue to think about, refine, read, research, but I'm coming to some conclusion that the way we're doing education is not really suitable for the times that we're living in, and we need to make some changes. And this is particularly true because of the effects of what Rosa calls social acceleration, also the impacts of technological changes like generative AI, and that we need to maybe rethink things. So that's what I'm going to be talking about, and I thank you for your time in watching this video. Thank you very much indeed.